Imagine this, a run-down spacebar packed with the wildest aliens you can picture, all ready to throw down over a spilled drink. But what they didn't expect was one reckless, beer-loving human turning a full-blown intergalactic brawl into a masterclass on what makes humanity truly terrifying and brilliant. It wasn't strength. It wasn't tech. It was pure, chaotic creativity that made aliens question everything they knew about Earthlings. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show some love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's dive into this wonderfully unpredictable story that shook the galaxy. Captain Theo Riven didn't look like the kind of man who started revolutions. He wore an old flight jacket that smelled faintly of engine oil, had hair that hadn't seen a comb in weeks, and drank something called solar diesel without flinching. He lounged in a corner booth at the Spigot, a dive bar on orbital station Drix 4, legs crossed, cup half full, and a lopsided grin resting comfortably on his face like it lived there permanently. Across the sticky table from him sat Ambassador Keln of the Naquari Confederation. Keln's skin shimmered in shades of green and blue, like a frog dipped in moonlight, and his voice always carried the tone of someone politely trying not to panic. "You understand," Keln said, wringing his webbed hands, "that your species has been evaluated as mentally unstable?" Theo raised his cup. "Cheers to that. Took him long enough." Keln blinked all four of his eyes. "That isn't good, Captain Riven." "No, but it's accurate," Theo replied, calm as ever. "We're a species that straps ourselves to rockets and calls it adventure. We eat peppers that melt through forks for fun. We invented a sport where the main objective is to slam into each other until someone forgets what year it is. Sanity isn't exactly our national treasure." Keln opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish attempting public speaking. "But how can you be so casual about it? The Galactic Assembly's assessment means your people are barred from full participation. No alliances, no trade deals, nothing." Theo just smiled wider. "They'll change their minds. They just haven't had the right demonstration." That was when the front doors banged open, not dramatically, but with the heavy shuffle of a bad mood entering a room full of weaker moods. A tall, armor-plated creature known as a dragon stomped in, ducking under the doorway. Behind him were two Zari twins, sleek and smug, their tails flicking like they were already bored. Keln tensed. "Those are bounty hunters." Theo took another sip. "Don't worry, they're here for the drinks." That, of course, was a lie. The dragon spotted a smaller creature, a Karali trader with twitchy ears, sitting at the bar, sipping something fizzy and glowing. The bounty hunter walked straight over and knocked the drink from the Karali's hand without a word. The Karali squeaked, stood up, and shouted something in his native tongue. The dragon responded by growling and pushing him back into his seat. The entire bar went silent for about 2 seconds. Then a chair flew across the room. The Spigot had officially become a danger zone. Keln scrambled to his feet. "We should leave. Right now." Theo didn't move. He leaned back farther into the booth, eyes on the scene unfolding in front of him like a man watching fireworks. "Nah, sit tight. This is about to get interesting." The fight grew fast. Loud shouts, punches thrown, a table flipped over, someone wielding a mop like a sword. The bartender, a floating, tentacled blob named Luma, sighed and slid behind, the reinforced glass shielding that had been installed for nights like this. Keln ducked as a bottle whizzed past his head. "This is madness." Theo tilted his drink and watched a pair of reptilian traders attempt a flying tackle on the dragon. "This," he said, "is therapy." Another chair broke. Someone screamed, though it might have been in excitement. One of the Zari twins tried to climb onto the bar but got pulled down by a furious Briven with 3 arms and no sense of rhythm. Keln's eyes were wide. "You call this educational?" "It's better than any lecture I've ever sat through," Theo said, tapping the side of his glass. "This is how humans learn. Pressure, chaos, and the occasional uppercut. You can't be serious." "Watch closely," Theo said. "This is the part where something beautiful happens." Just then, a small creature with too many teeth and a fondness for neon sunglasses hurled a drink. bright green, bubbling, and probably toxic across the room. It splashed across 3 combatants, who immediately stopped fighting and began coughing and wheezing. That brief pause created space, a sliver of silence. The dragon paused, looking around as if unsure of what just happened. The Corrali slowly got to his feet, looked at his ruined shirt, and, bizarrely, laughed. Others began to laugh too. One of the Zari twins shrugged and held up a glass. "To poor aim and better drinks," he declared. Theo stood up at last, brushing non-existent dust off his jacket. "Told you." Keln stared at the room. What had been a battleground moments before now looked like a very odd party. Someone was setting chairs back up. Luma floated out of hiding with a tray of replacement drinks. Even the dragon, grumpy and growling, accepted a peace offering shot from the Corrali. "You manipulated this," Keln said, astonished. "You knew it would happen this way?" Theo shrugged. "Didn't know, just hoped. That's the thing about humans. We don't always have plans, but we've got instincts. And instincts, my friend, make us unpredictable." Keln sat back down slowly, still watching the strange gathering of recently violent beings now bonding over spilled drinks and bruised egos. And Captain Theo Riven, with a crooked smile and the last sip of solar diesel, simply said, "This is just the warm-up." And somewhere deep in the galaxy, fate raised an eyebrow. The spigot had seen its fair share of strange nights, but this one was shaping up to be legend. Just 10 minutes ago, the bar had been a simmering mess of spilled drinks, bruised egos, and bent chairs. Now it was in full boil, like someone had cranked the chaos to maximum and then tossed the knob out the airlock. Captain Theo Riven, still cool as ever, was now standing near the jukebox, though no music played, unless you counted the rhythmic thumping of boots, bottles, and belligerents. The thing about the spigot was that it didn't just attract trouble. It practically put out a welcome mat and offered it a drink. At least half the patrons were outlaws, opportunists, or thrill-seekers from the rougher corners of the galaxy. And tonight, for reasons no one would remember clearly tomorrow, they were all feeling a little punchy. Saravin was the kind of trader who liked 3 things: speed, sarcasm, and never losing a fight. She had sleek fur, sharp teeth, and the attitude of a house cat that had learned karate. She'd just watched her overpriced glow-in-the-dark cocktail explode across the chest of a bulky miner named Bark Molan. Bark looked like someone had stacked boulders until they learned to talk. He was not happy. "You want to say that again?" Bark grunted, wiping glowing liquid from his chin. Sarah didn't blink. "Sure. Try not to wear your drinks next time, Rockhead." That was enough. Bark roared and lunged, and Sarah flipped over the table like she was born for it. Drinks scattered. Chips flew. A bowl of glowing space peanuts hit someone square in the face and may have started another argument entirely. In the middle of it all, Theo raised his glass. "Ah," he said, more to himself than anyone else. Phase 2. Ambassador Keln, still huddled behind a turned-over bench, peeked out with pure horror painted across his amphibious features. "Why does it feel like this is getting worse?" "It is," Theo agreed. "Beautifully worse." Across the room, Luma the bartender was attempting to wrangle spilled drinks back onto trays, all while glowing a steady pale blue, spigot speak. For deep concern, but she didn't flee. Luma had seen riots, weddings, and even one impromptu opera in this bar. She knew how the rhythm of chaos worked. She floated just low enough to avoid flying objects, but high enough to keep an eye on the action. The fight was no longer a single argument. It had evolved into something else. A brawl of pure, rolling momentum. 2 Brackery gamblers were fighting over who had the right to throw the next punch. A group of insectoid diplomats had built a barricade from stools and were using napkin holders as projectile launchers. Someone had brought in a cleaning robot that was now spinning in circles, bleating confused warnings as it tried to vacuum broken glass and alien slime. Through it all, Theo moved like a conductor directing a symphony of chaos. He bumped one fighter, into another, redirected a flying chair with a casual kick, and even paused to compliment a Scalari's improvised uppercut form. "Elegant," he murmured, nodding in approval. But the real magic happened when Sarah, mid-spin kick, yelled across the room, "Hey, you owe me a new drink." Bark, mid-swing, paused just long enough to grunt. "You started it." "No, you spilled it." The argument flipped. Instead of fists, they were now tossing blame like grenades. And weirdly, everyone nearby started chiming in. One by one, the fighters began airing grievances instead of punches. "You cheated me in a dice game last week." "That wasn't cheating, that was creative math." "You took my parking spot." "You don't even have a ship." It was absurd. And somehow that made it better. The chaos didn't stop, it shifted. The violence melted into shouting, pointing, and dramatic gestures. The energy remained, but it had been rerouted, like a river that suddenly found a new path. Keln crawled over to Theo, who was now sitting cross-legged on the bar like it was his personal throne. "What is happening?" Theo sipped something that was probably illegal. "Catharsis." Keln's mouth opened and closed. "You weaponized emotion." "Not weaponized. Redirected. You see, logic fails when people are heated. But give them a common outlet, blame, storytelling, maybe a dance-off, and you avoid bloodshed without asking anyone to be reasonable. Because nobody here wants to be reasonable. They want to be heard." Abracari and Atholian were now arm-wrestling over who had the right to sit at the bar. A trio of minors had formed a conga line. The Zari twins were refereeing a dart game, where the dartboard had clearly been replaced with a menu screen. "It's madness," Keln muttered. Theo smiled. "No, it's human." Someone passed Keln a drink. It was pink and bubbling ominously. He stared at it like it might explode, then took a cautious sip. It didn't explode. It just tasted like cinnamon and bad decisions. Across the room, Sarah laughed as Bark tried to apologize by buying her another glowing cocktail. Luma floated by and plopped down a tray of mystery snacks with a shrug. The room hummed with a strange, fragile energy, like everyone knew how close they'd come to disaster and were too relieved to admit it. Theo leaned back, arms stretched wide, eyes twinkling with mischief. "See, Keln, you wanted to understand human psychology?" Keln nodded slowly. Theo gestured around the room. "This is it. This is the chaos formula. We don't prevent the mess, we dance with it." And somehow, against all logic and odds, it was working. The next morning, Orbital Station Drix 4 was still standing. Barely. The spigot looked like it had hosted a war, a festival, and a food fight all at once, and somehow gotten a 5-star review for all three. Tables were upended, lights flickered, and a strange purple foam covered one corner of the ceiling. No one knew where it came from, and frankly, no one wanted to ask. Captain Theo Riven returned to the bar like he'd never left. Same jacket, same grin, and probably the same stains on his shirt. He strolled in as if the chaos from the night before had been nothing more than a casual dinner party. Behind him, Ambassador Keln walked more carefully, surveying the damage with the wary look of someone expecting a structural collapse. "Morning, Luma," Theo called out cheerfully. The bartender, still glowing a faint orange that probably meant exhaustion, floated by without a word and deposited a cup of something steaming in front of Theo. Keln sat down beside him, still trying to process the events from the night before. He had reviewed his notes twice and still couldn't decide if what he had witnessed was a diplomatic breakthrough or a textbook example of intergalactic insanity. "I've written down 37 separate behavioral anomalies," Keln said, scrolling through his datapad. Theo sipped his drink. "You forgot the part where the Zari twins taught everyone to play zero-gravity limbo using a mop and an emergency sprinkler." "That's listed under social adaptation experiments," Amos Keln replied dryly. "But we may need a new category for creative violence." Before Theo could reply, the bar doors hissed open. In stepped Commander Rusk Torg, a towering reptilian, figure clad in dark blue armor with a badge pinned to his chest that practically screamed, "Don't test me." He was followed by two assistants who looked like they were trying very hard not to touch anything. Theo didn't flinch. "Morning, Commander, you're up early." "I never went to sleep," Rusk growled. His tail flicked once, an obvious sign of irritation. Security logs show over 25 distinct physical altercations in this establishment last night. That's not including the diplomatic tug-of-war over the karaoke machine. Theo raised an eyebrow. You say that like it's a bad thing. Property damage, minor injuries, noise complaints from 3 levels down. And for some reason the station gardens are reporting a missing ornamental cactus. Keln cleared, his throat nervously. I believe that may have been used as a weapon. Theo looked impressed. Really? I missed that one. Rusk stepped closer, looming over them like a walking wall of judgment. Explain. Now. Theo didn't look intimidated. If anything, he looked bored. Commander, tell me, what would have happened if that first fight hadn't been redirected? Rusk didn't answer immediately. He remembered the dragon, the shouting, the moment before the whole place could have exploded into real violence. He remembered the silence that followed a flying drink and a human standing with his arms wide and a grin on his face. It would have turned into a security-level incident, Rusk admitted, reluctantly. Theo nodded. Exactly. But instead it became let's call it an interactive team-building exercise. Rusk narrowed his eyes. You're telling me that what I saw in those reports was intentional? Not planned, Theo replied, but purposeful. There's a difference, Keln chimed in, still watching the commander. Captain Riven believes in what he calls structured unpredictability. Rusk turned to Keln. That's not a real term. Keln shrugged. It is now. I'm submitting it to the Galactic Assembly's Behavioral Sciences Department. Great, Rusk muttered. Just what we need. More chaos, but this time with footnotes. Theo leaned forward. Look, I get it. You like things clean, orderly, predictable, but the galaxy's a messy place, and sometimes when the rules don't work, you need people who don't follow them. And you think humans are those people? I think we're specialists in thinking sideways, Theo replied. We don't win because we're stronger or smarter. We win because no one can guess what we'll do next. One of Rusk's assistants cleared their throat. Commander, we're getting requests from station leadership to provide a briefing on last night's event. There's interest in this human approach. Rusk sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Fine. Right. The report, but I want it stated clearly that I do not endorse this madness. Keln nodded. Of course, Commander. But you might want to know. The Assembly has already reached out. They want to discuss this event in an emergency session. They're calling it an example of non-traditional diplomatic potential. Theo grinned. See? Told you it would catch on. Rusk grunted. If you ever pull something like this again, Riven, I want a 5-minute warning. Deal, Theo said. 5 minutes is all I need. As Rusk turned and stomped out of the bar, mumbling about rewriting the station's conflict training manual, Keln sat back and looked at Theo thoughtfully. You really didn't know it would work, did you? Theo took another sip of his drink, then smirked. Of course not. But that's the beauty of unpredictability. It keeps everyone guessing, even me. Outside, the station buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. But inside the spigot, something had shifted. Not just in furniture and broken light panels, but in perspective. For the first time in a long while, unpredictability wasn't something to be feared. It was something to be studied, and Theo Riven, accidental ambassador of Earth's strangest virtues, was just getting started. Captain Theo Riven stood in the center of the Galactic Assembly chamber and wondered, not for the first time, how in the stars he had ended up here. The room was enormous, shaped like a circle so everyone could see everyone else, with seating tiers that curved around like an arena built for debate instead of battle. Lights glowed in soft hues from the walls, and the air smelled like disinfectant and diplomacy. Around him were beings from nearly every known corner of the galaxy, some with eyes, some without, some floating in tanks or shimmering with energy, others standing tall in armor or robes. It was, without a doubt, the most powerful group of individuals ever gathered in one room, and they were all staring at him. Ambassador Keln stood to Theo's right, his skin pale from stress but his posture firm. He had just delivered his report, a calm and detailed summary of how one chaotic bar fight had somehow turned into a case study in conflict resolution. The delegates had listened in stunned silence. Now it was Theo's turn to speak. Prime Coordinator, Thalen, a being made of flickering light and soft vibration, addressed him with a voice that echoed gently from every corner of the room. Captain Riven, we have reviewed the footage and reports. We are puzzled. Would you care to explain what exactly happened on Orbital Station Drix 4? Theo cleared his throat. Well, you see, there was this drink, bright green, smelled like regret and lighter fluid. Someone spilled it, tempers flared, fists flew, and next thing you know, everyone's dancing and sharing appetizers. Pretty standard Tuesday for us. A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. One crystalline delegate leaned forward, shining faintly. You're saying you resolved a multi-species conflict with a bar fight? Not exactly, Theo replied. I redirected it. The fight was already starting. All I did was give it room to play out in a way that didn't end in blaster fire and body bags. An aquatic diplomat burbled something that a nearby translator turned into, "That is not diplomacy. That is chaos." Sure, Theo said with a shrug, but it's our kind of chaos. Humans don't always know the best way to handle things, but when things go wrong, we're really, really good at finding weird ways to fix them. Another delegate, one of the insectoid types with a dozen glittering eyes, clicked its mandibles. You call this a strategy? Theo grinned. Unpredictability is a strategy. Think about it. Most species here operate with systems, traditions, procedures. That's great, until the problem doesn't fit the system. Then what do? You need someone willing to flip the table and try something completely different. Sometimes that's us. Silence fell again. Some delegates leaned forward. Others sat back, arms crossed or limbs folded. The Valdorian representative, a sharp-featured figure known for his love of order, stood. You admit that your behavior could have led to disaster, that it was based on improvisation, not planning. You call this leadership? No, Theo said. I call it humanity. There were a few chuckles from the back rows, small ones nervous, but there was laughter. He took a breath and looked around. Look, I know how we must seem. Loud, messy, reckless. But everything you've built, the peace, the structure, the rules, some of that only exists because someone, at some point, did something crazy and different. Every invention, every discovery, every leap forward came from someone who wasn't afraid to try the impossible. The Prime Coordinator's form pulsed gently. And you believe humanity offers this to the galaxy? I think we can, Theo replied. Give us the impossible problems, the ones no one else can figure out. We'll mess up, sure, but we'll also surprise you. There was a long pause, the kind of pause that made rooms feel smaller, air feel heavier. Then someone laughed. It wasn't elegant or refined. It was a deep, wheezing kind of laugh, one that seemed surprised to be escaping its owner. A bulky diplomat from the mining colonies clapped a hand to his side and kept laughing. A few more followed, and then a sound rippled through the chamber that had rarely been heard there before. Shared, genuine laughter. Theo blinked. Was it something I said? Prime Coordinator Thalen shimmered brighter. Captain Riven, you are without doubt the most unusual envoy we have ever received. I get that a lot, Theo said, deadpan. A soft voice came from the corner. Perhaps what we consider sanity is simply a different kind of limitation. Eyes turned to Keln. The ambassador stood taller now, the nerves in his voice replaced with calm certainty. We labeled the humans as unstable because they didn't match our standards, but last night I saw a species take chaos and turn it into connection. Violence became laughter. Enemies became drinking buddies. That's not madness, that's adaptation. The Prime Coordinator paused. So what do? Theo raised a hand. If you're asking me, start by giving us a challenge, something no one's cracked. We'll either fail in spectacular fashion or pull off a miracle. Either way, you'll be entertained. That earned another chuckle from the crowd. The energy had shifted. Prime Coordinator Thalen's voice rose gently. Very well. The Assembly will create a special task force. One focused on unconventional solutions. Captain Riven, if you're willing, we'd like you to lead it. Theo blinked. You want me to fix your unsolvable problems? No, Thalen said with what might have been a smile in his tone. We want you to try. As Theo walked out of the chamber, Keln beside him, the sound of delegates still talking, still laughing, echoed behind them. The galaxy wasn't sure what it had just agreed to, but it was curious. And Theo Riven knew one thing for sure. Curiosity was the first step to chaos, and sometimes that was exactly what the galaxy needed.